Welcome to WCNY's live coverage of Governor Andrew Cuomo's State of the State address. I'm Susan Arbetter. Today, lawmakers from around the state are back in Albany for the governor's address. This is traditionally the most important policy address of the year. Not only does the speech mark the very first day of the legislative session, it also gives the governor an opportunity to lay out his policy agenda before both houses of the legislature. Like he has in other years, Governor Cuomo has opted to present his address in the Empire State Plaza Convention Center. The speech is expected to begin at 1:30 and last about an hour, but we're talking about Cuomo time, so everything is a little squishy. WCNY will bring you the entire address live. Prior to the speech, we have something of a pregame show for you. And joining me in the studio, we have Marie Morelli, the editorial opinion leader at Syracuse.com and the Syracuse Post-Standard. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Susan. Good to be here.
And we have Bill Broad, publisher and CEO of the Syracuse New-Times. It's great to meet you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Susan.
So we know this is an election year. We know that this is the governor's last speech of his first term in office, his last State of the State address. With that in mind, let's begin with what your general expectations are, beginning with Marie Morelli.
Well, I think you can expect the governor to tell us what a great job he's been doing for the past 3 years. And
right out of the gate.
He'll be trumpeting his, closing a deficit, enacting a tax cap, passing gay marriage. You can name a whole bunch of things, how he handled Hurricane Sandy. So he's going to tell us what a great job he's done, and then he'll probably go into what he thinks he ought to, his next year, his final year as governor before as he runs for re-election.
What do you expect, Bill Broad, other than that?
Yeah, I would agree with Marie. I think he's going to use the podium to pat himself on the back, but I think we should look beyond I think some of the softball things that he has done and look at some of the things that he still has to do. And that'll be the real key behind today, is to set the tone for what he thinks he can get done in the next year and beyond if he's reelected.
What is your assessment of the governor's tenure so far? Just by the nature of what you just said, it doesn't sound like you're a huge fan.
You know, it's funny. There are times when I find myself as a businessman agreeing with some of his policies, and I sure hope he's able to continue to contain the cost of running New York State, which I think is excessive and has made us completely non-competitive with the rest of the country. And socially, I think he's been way off the mark, although he's pandering to the constituency that he's looking for continued support from.
Pandering to the constituency. Which constituency is that?
It would be the liberal wing of his party.
Then how do you account for his very business-oriented tax plans that he rolled out on Monday?
Well, let's see the details. I think the devil will be in the details. You have to...
The detail of zeroing out a tax for the income tax for corporate manufacturers is, I mean, that's pretty black and white.
Absolutely. And that's an easy thing for Albany to do. But then if the net is you still have to run the state government, and that money's got to come from somewhere. So this is tax policy is kind of like a balloon theory. When you squeeze on one side, it pops out somewhere else, sometimes with unintended consequences. So that's where the detail is so important.
You know, that's a great point that you make, Bill, that we are hearing the governor's tax proposals without knowing all of the facts. And it's not just us who don't know all the facts. He doesn't either. There are certain revenue assumptions that he's making. How do you think the governor's tax plan is based in firm ground, Marie?
No, I do not. And we'll have to see the budget to see where he's going to come up with a $2 billion surplus. There's quite a bit of skepticism that there is $2 billion there. It may be in future years. And so the question is, where is that money going to come from?
Your assessment of the governor's tenure so far? Is it like Bill's, or do you have a more positive assessment?
I would have a more positive assessment. I would say that his policies have been very pro-business, and the tax-free zone...
Overly pro-business?
Not overly so. I think there's definitely been a reputation for New York to be driving away business, and we know that people have been moving out in droves. and he's got to do something that's going to change the map. And so far, we're waiting to see whether his tax-free zones at SUNY campuses will really be a game changer. Editorially, we supported it because something needs to be done to keep businesses here, attract new businesses. So I would say that on overall, his tenure has been good for business in New York.
So, you know, sometimes they say politics is about perception. And although we don't have the hard numbers right now in terms of what he is planning for his tax proposals, from the outside looking in, he is trying to make New York more business friendly. Just the perception, do you think has it improved in your opinion, Bill? What people on the outside looking in think?
Well, I wonder what somebody from the outside would think. You know, Marie mentioned the tax-free zones around universities, for instance. To me, that sounds a little bit like the Empire Zone issues, where businesses then remade themselves so they could become tax-free. And
You think that there's going to be some, you know, wiggling of the rules?
yeah, well, it has to. I mean, when you allow businesses to come onto a SUNY campus and start, and there's no, it has to be new business creation if it has any chance at all of working. If businesses just simply remake themselves, move on to a SUNY campus, employ essentially the same people or types of people, the net is you've gone actually the wrong way, because you've now frozen the income taxes those people would pay, the property taxes those businesses would pay, and you've actually gone the wrong way. So I could imagine somebody who from a state neighboring us looking at that saying, that's just another New York gimmick that doesn't really create any new business, doesn't create any new wealth.
And Marie, you feel differently, obviously, because you have editorialized in a positive way.
Well, we'll have to see what the regulations are, and I think that's the reason we haven't seen them yet, is that they're trying to make them tougher to
The
avoid
devil is in the details.
the Empire Zone disaster, which our
Yeah.
paper reported on quite extensively.
We're going to talk about the business cuts more in a second, but the centerpiece of his tax proposal for human beings is this tax freeze. It's a property tax freeze for 2 years with certain caveats. It's a complicated idea, and so we have a clip that we can share with you to give you a little background.
We propose a property tax credit which will freeze the residential property taxes for 2 years, okay? However, there are two important caveats in this promise. First, the locality must stay within the property tax cap. We passed a property tax cap of 2%. It's basically a voluntary cap. We want to encourage localities to stay within the cap. So we're saying if they stay within the cap, we will credit the residents of the locality for the 2% increase. Year 2 of the 2-year freeze, the locality must stay within that cap, and they must take concrete steps to reduce costs through shared services and/or consolidation. What are shared services or consolidation? You have 10,500 governments. You have surrounding governments. Get to a table, find out what costs you can share. Does everyone need to do fleet maintenance? Does everyone need to do payroll? Does everybody need to do insurance? Does everybody need to do legal affairs? Let's cooperate, let's collaborate, and find out where there are some efficiencies by not merging, not consolidating, just sharing back office functions. It requires them to get past their turf and get past their silo, but it's essential if we're going to make a difference.
So Governor Cuomo has been beating the consolidation shared services drum since he was Attorney General. My question is there any proof that this saves money, Marie? Not that that's the only reason to do it.
Well, there's not enough proof. And in Onondaga County and Syracuse, several departments have merged. And in fact, when they merged, the planning department they said, well, this is not really going to save any money. It's going to, down the road, maybe save developers some, extra work having to deal with 2 different departments. But their idea was to make it better services. So I think the idea that you can consolidate your way out of a hole is not going to fly.
What do you think, Bill? I saw you shaking your
I
head.
agree with Marie. I think the government should take a spoonful of his own medicine and start in Albany, because anybody who's dealt with the state government understands that the bureaucracy and the institutional negative inertia in Albany is so great that the minute you hear any department from New York State is inquiring in the least amount in your business, it sends cold shudders down every businessman's spine. And I like to think, just from a pure economic standpoint, that the idea of consolidating and sharing services makes sense, but you specifically mentioned fleet maintenance. So let's say you have 2 fleets and you bring them together, you still have essentially the same number of vehicles. You're going to need essentially the same number of mechanics to service those vehicles, assuming those departments are running optimally. What you can eliminate maybe is some management, but essentially you're not really saving a ton. So I think Maria is absolutely right on when she says you can't save your way to prosperity.
Stephanie Miner made a very good point today, saying that the problem that Syracuse and other big cities have, and not so big cities, is that their pension obligations are enormous. The pension obligation in Syracuse is something like $33 million. There's no way that any sharing of services or a consolidation is going to make up for that $33 million deficit. Another issue is that this also includes school districts. And I asked my friend Dr. Rick Timms to come up with a list of defeated school mergers, and the list is pretty long. School districts, it's very difficult for school districts to merge, not because the school districts don't want to, but because it has to go to a vote, and there are some turf issues when it comes to voters. How do you get around that? It has to go to a school vote. So do you get punished because the voters don't want it?
Well, that's probably I think the key thing that the state is trying to do by, when the governor talks about he's going to slash the property taxes, essentially he's going to slash the money that comes back into the communities. And so he's putting pressure on, from that standpoint, to force the municipalities to do what he wants them to do, which is consolidate, and schools will be in the same boat.
And it's also not really a 2% tax cap, is it?
No.
Right.
There are many loopholes.
There are many loopholes, and because, on the other side of the coin, because there is such low inflation, the inflation rate is keeping it not so much at a 2%, but I think for municipalities it's 1.7% this year. For school districts, 1.4%. So it's going to be a tough road to hoe for that. But
Susan, if I could say one more thing about
please.
consolidation. Even when it is in the voters' self-interest, they don't always get along. And we had that here in East Syracuse last year when a police merger was proposed with the town of DeWitt, which would have saved taxpayers $240 a year, and they voted it down. Yes, and then their taxes went up 22% in the village of East Syracuse. Now they're thinking about it again, but there's still quite a bit of opposition to that idea. So,
do you think that this carrot-stick approach might change voters' attitudes? I mean, they would be getting this windfall from the state.
Yeah, well, that's the idea, and I hope it does, because yes, they somehow need to be convinced that it's in their own interest to cut down on government, but they still want services. They still want, the police department to put them to bed at night. They want everything. They want lower taxes, and they also want all kinds of services.
In terms of business cuts, the governor has recommended, as we mentioned, the manufacturing. He wants to phase out more quickly the 18A utility assessment. He's also recommended a few others. Again, we bring you a clip from Monday's press conference, which took place as a sort of preview to today's State of the State address.
To make the state more competitive, cut the burdensome business taxes. New York State corporate income tax rate is now 7.1%. The commission recommends cutting it to 6.5%, which will be the lowest rate since 1968. I think this is important. I think that businesses will get this. At a time when everything is going up in life, right? Every cost is going up. You don't hear about a cost going back to where it was in 1968. And that's exactly what I want to do with the corporate tax rate. To help stimulate the creation of manufacturing jobs, which is of special import to the state, a manufacturer's property tax credit, 20% of the firm's property tax liability. Property tax, which we'll mention later on, is the largest tax in the state. Offer manufacturers, who very often have a large property tax bill because they have a large piece of property, a 20% credit where we'll reimburse them 20% of their property tax. We have focused on upstate New York on top of the overall economic focus because the economic problems in upstate New York are worse than downstate New York, and the economic trajectory of upstate has been worse for a long time. So we have a special focus on upstate New York, and I'm proud to say that. Using that focus here, we want to reduce the corporate income tax in upstate New York for manufacturers to zero. Period. Zero. Just say our tax rate for manufacturing companies in upstate New York is zero, because you can't beat zero. And everybody knows it. And you want to make a powerful statement of this is a different New York and it's a different time, and if you want to locate your business anywhere, look at New York because you think we're high cost, you're exactly wrong. We're actually the lowest cost. We're zero. It's the debate, the discussion is over.
So I think that he made the point that it's zero. So Bill Broad, this is, Elizabeth Lynham said that this is groundbreaking. Do you think so?
Well, again, the devil's in the details. Zero for how long? When you take an investment,
You're a tough nut to crack.
Well, you know, you take a big business. The only business that's going to really benefit from that, what he just said, is an enormous business that's going to put an enormous investment in infrastructure. Nanotechnology center, for instance. A small business like mine, you know, to go from 7.1 to 6.5%, it's really inconsequential.
There are small manufacturers in upstate.
Agreed. But anybody who is in manufacturing is going to make an investment in infrastructure. To make an investment in infrastructure, you want to know that you're going to get a return on that investment, and it's very expensive to come and locate a new business in New York State. And when the business climate could change rapidly and you would then have to move, you know how difficult it is to move a manufacturing business? So there's going to be a very calloused and jaded view of what does this really mean, zero income tax. And then you still have to deal with things like environmental regulations, and you know, the guys who build your infrastructure are going to deal with the scaffold law. We could talk a lot about that.
Well, we're going to talk about mandates.
So there's an incredible number of mandates that follow along with that.
Absolutely.
So zero corporate tax rate honestly doesn't impress me that much.
Marie?
I defer to Bill. I'd say that I'm not a business person, so I don't pay business taxes. But he's going to have to convince the business community that this is really good for them. And so far, from what I've heard from the Business Council and others, they're saying we're on the right track. Well, we'll see what's the details say about the proposal.
Reducing the state's corporate tax rate from 6.5 from 7.1. And that's the lowest it's been since 1968. Does that resonate with you as a business person, Bill?
No, not at all. I mean, it's great that we're nostalgically going back to 1968, but the simple fact is that we're still higher than many states around the nation. And again, you have to look at the entire package of what it costs to do business. It's more than just the corporate tax rate. It really is. It's so much more than that.
We're going to go now to the second part of what he is proposing as a tax break for human beings. Okay, this is the circuit breaker, and this would be phased in after the 2-year tax freeze. And again, we defer to the governor to explain it for himself.
Third is property tax credit tied to ability to pay. We also need a measure that links property tax with income and low-income households and gives a break to low-income households who are paying a high percentage of their income to property taxes. It's called a circuit breaker, but it basically adjusts property tax according to ability to pay.
More than any other proposal, the devil is in the details in the circuit breaker, because you can raise it's all a matter of the ratio of your ability to pay with your income. And, depending on where the thresholds are, it could be an absolutely meaningless proposal. Is this a big issue in Syracuse?
Property taxes? They are in the suburbs. In the city of Syracuse, the mayor has resisted raising property taxes, even though we're in some deep financial trouble, because it's simply half the property in Syracuse is tax exempt. And so,
also the wherewithal. I mean, the residents of the city of Syracuse don't have them.
They're poor people, so they don't have the ability to pay.
Right.
So yeah, a property tax circuit breaker, I think, if he can explain it and if get people to understand it, it might fly. But I don't really understand it yet, and so we'll see.
It may be meaningful for people in two areas. The people who pay enormous property taxes down in Westchester and Long Island, and people in, for example, Wayne County, and in other counties in upstate New York where there's high poverty and where, their income to property tax ratio is just, it's just too large for them to cope, and many of them lose their homes. Do you have any comment on this, Bill? Is this a good idea? I mean, this is the one tax proposal that's sort of a nod to the progressive community.
I think it could be. And I think Maria's right on target where, we need to see an awful lot more. The one thing I would ask is, in order to enforce a circuit breaker, what do you need to do to the state taxation department? And what does that do to the idea of enforcement? Anytime you create buckets of differences within the tax code, somebody has to be there to police that.
Oh, he has said that he wants to simplify the tax code.
Well, he's not. This proposal would not do that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, all of the proposals that he is suggesting would only, muddy the waters.
I mean, if you want to talk about simplifying the tax code, make it a straight consumption tax. If you consume something,
You are an advocate for this. Tell us why. This is the sales tax model.
Absolutely, and we need to, in order to make this right, you have to fix the way sales tax is distributed. It's based on assessed value, so upstate is heavily penalized versus downstate. So you'd have to first fix that, but it would essentially tax people who consume, and the more of a luxury item you have, the more high ticket the item is, the more you would be essentially taxed. And if you were a starting family who decided, we're going to not eat out, we're going to hold on to the car,
stick to our austerity budget.
Stay austere. Yep. You could end up cutting your tax bill yourself, and you would give people economic incentive to find ways to cut their own tax bill.
Are you running for office?
No, absolutely not.
What do you think about that sales tax model?
Well,
I never thought of it.
They have it in Canada. They have value-added tax. That's an interesting idea. It would separate. Maybe it's a way to separate school funding from the property tax, because that's another area where it's
politically. Why do lawmakers in Albany not discuss this, the sales tax? It seems to make sense.
Well, it's probably not in their interest to do so.
Clearly.
So
while it might be a good idea, it might not be politically viable.
Here's the simple answer: the political balance is shifted heavily to downstate. Downstate receives the lion's share of sales tax based on assessed value, and upstate never really gets to the table to have a discussion on that.
And we don't have the political clout to change that dynamic.
And not likely to have that change anytime soon.
We, again, are presenting WCNY's live coverage of the state address, and we actually have a picture of what's going on right now in Albany, and I think that was just Dr. John King that we saw walking down the aisle there. This is like the first day of school. All of these lawmakers have been in their districts for the last 6 months, and this is like their, oh my gosh, great to see you. I haven't seen you in so long. There's definitely a very social element to this day. Is that John DeFrancisco right in the middle there? I believe it is. That's the senator from the Syracuse area. That's Denny Farrell in the yellow tie. He's one of Speaker Sheldon Silver's top deputies, head of the Finance Committee. And there are the screens. We know the governor loves to present his State of the State using PowerPoint presentations. So I wonder if that's going to happen this year as well. Still a lot of empty seats, but we will get back to, there was Addie Russell right there, and Janet Depew. It's a who's who of the Albany political class. So what we're going to do now is take a note from what you mentioned earlier, Bill, about mandates, unfunded mandates that are crippling businesses in some people's opinion. Mandate relief is something that's hard, and that's why we hear a lot about it, but we don't ever seem to be moving the ball forward in some people's opinion. So let's again go back to Monday's presser in the Red Room and hear what the governor had to say about mandate relief.
Is the number of local governments. We have been very aggressive in trying to deal with this issue. First, the state assumed a large number of the costs that the local governments were paying. We've taken over more local costs than any state government has taken over in modern political history. About $1.2 billion over 5 years in the growth of Medicaid from local governments. We passed pension reform, which has been a major problem for governments in this state and governments all across the country. We have been unwilling to further enable or facilitate local governments that are functionally bankrupt, is the expression I use, because there are governments where the numbers just don't work, and they've been getting by year to year by cash subsidies, and they say that balances the books. It doesn't balance the books. It just pushes the problem to the next year. We've offered them financial restructuring, where they can come in. They'll meet with our financial restructuring board. We have an investment banker. We'll talk about financing options. We'll talk about consolidation options. 10,500 governments. Can you start to put them together?
What's most interesting about that clip is what we don't hear. When you talk about mandates in New York, there are several that are enormous and that he didn't even refer to. Triborough would be considered a mandate. Scaffold would be considered a mandate. Wicks considered a mandate. And you didn't hear any of them. You were disappointed.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that mandate is a crippling part of a tax on
Some
businesses.
people believe that it is.
I believe it is. But I would expand that from businesses to even the local municipalities. I talk to friends of mine on local school boards, and they tell me that 92, 3, 4% of what they are voting on the school board is already mandated to them. So they're really only looking at 6% of the entire budget that they have some discretion.
But it's hard because, that part of the that they don't have any control over is like money for special ed kids. Politically, it's hard to talk about taking money away from special ed kids. It's politically difficult to say teachers, if you're, the Triborough Amendment is difficult because so many of the unions are, they hang their hat on this in order to achieve better deals for their members. And scaffold law, again, unions are very powerful in Albany. Trial lawyers as well. Exactly. Marie, any comment?
We're the only state in the nation that has a scaffold law now.
We are.
Yes, and we editorialized last year to repeal the scaffold law. I agree that there are mandates that are not going to come up in today's address, And neither the governor nor the legislature have the political will to tackle them. And that's why you hear the mayor of Syracuse complaining about deaf ears in Albany.
We're going to be, the folks in Albany say that the speech is going to begin in about 6 or 7 minutes. So why don't we move on from...
I have one more comment on that.
Please.
That the whole idea of, of mandates, that, the cost that it passes on is exactly what the governor is saying. He's trying to force local municipalities to stem. But it's very difficult when that local municipality has these forced on them, and then the tap of money that comes from Albany to pay for those mandates is then shut off.
To a trickle.
And the local municipality is left saying, I have no choice but to stop certain services. Example, NPR story the other day about a Medicaid patient who went to the hospital after 3 weeks because she ran out of social services for food stamps, got her blood sugar way down, and had to go to the emergency room to get food. Now, again, it's that balloon theory where when you press on one side, it pops out somewhere else. So the governor needs to really talk about the mandate relief. That's where the traction is.
Do you realize that back in the 70s, it was government in Albany sent about 8%. 8% of the budget was sent to localities. And since then, it's just been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Interestingly, again, to dovetail from what you both mentioned, his little bullet point there was the state takeover of local government Medicaid growth. That was his, nod to what the government in Albany has done for localities. Interestingly, the counties want the state to take over all of Medicaid, not just the growth element, which is, this much compared to this much. So
it's the only thing
we're
that the
talking
state
about
probably can do better than. I would defy you to find me anyone who thinks they can be served better by a state government than they can by their local government, except possibly Medicaid. That might be the only place where that administration could prove efficient.
Let's talk about some of the social issues. All of what we know that the governor is going to be presenting today in the State of the State, all of these tax proposals, is in stark contrast to what the mayor of New York City is proposing, the new mayor, Bill de Blasio. He is proposing a tax increase on the wealthy to pay for universal pre-K. So the governor has a very different agenda. Do you think that it's the right agenda?
On pre-K? Or
no, I mean on
tax cuts versus tax increases.
Universal pre-K works.
Sure. And
so it would be a good investment.
And the governor may be putting it in his budget. Where there was some word earlier this week that he was going to talk about it today, then he shot that down on Monday.
Along with medical marijuana.
Along with medical marijuana. And so, for all we know, he could be figuring out a way to pay for it in the budget somehow. I think it's an interesting political moment where we have New York City tilting to the left and the governor tilting to the right, and we'll see how it shakes out.
Do you think that universal pre-K would be worth raising money on the wealthy for?
Well, let's get less specific, because one of the first things you have to do is define wealthy, and I think the governor's definition of wealthy tends to be a little less than what the average person sees themselves as. But I do believe that universal pre-K is proven that that's a worthy investment in preparing children to learn. So yes, I would agree that that is one of the worthy things to fund because there's a return on that investment. How you do it, then that's a different story.
That's the theme of our conversation, devil in details. This is WCNY's live coverage of the governor's State of the State address. This is his fourth State of the State address, the final address of his first term in office. And we have a live shot right there on the screen. People, a lot more people have filed in since the last time we checked in. The governor is supposed to begin his speech at 1:30, but we know that this is not exact timing. It could be much later. Last year, I think he started about 20 minutes late. I'm not really sure, but and last year's speech was quite lengthy, I seem to remember. I'm not sure about this speech, but he did give us a hint on Monday when he said that I have to share with you my tax proposals today because there's so much in my speech that I can't fit it all in. So we could be in for a pretty lengthy state of the state. Before we run out of time, I want to ask you both, what should the governor be addressing, in your opinion? Marie?
Well, from a Central New York point of view, crime is a big issue in Syracuse. We had 22 homicides last year. The SAFE Act tackled gun control for law-abiding gun owners, does nothing about illegal guns in cities.
Would not have prevented Newtown.
And probably not, but I don't expect him to say anything about crime. I think the state must have some leadership and some role in jobs, education, all the things that sort of feed into the to the crime that we have seen in our urban areas.
So let me just present this to you, that we keep hearing about the three themes that he's going to be touching upon today: taxes, tourism, technology. And one of the analysts that I spoke with today on the radio, Larry Levy, said that all of those are under a uber theme of economic development and job creation. And the governor would likely say to your comment on crime, all of this helps to prevent crime.
Indeed, and so let's see it. We need to have better schools. We need to have opportunities for graduates. Well, first we need the graduates, and then we need the opportunities for them. And we need more people going to college.
It's one thing that I think that reporters in Albany sometimes lose sight of, that proposals are one thing, but the proof is in the pudding, right? What do you think the governor should be addressing?
It's the economy, stupid.
And you don't think he's doing that?
I don't know. He's chipping at it in politically expedient ways, but the center of the target really is containing costs and making New York more competitive. And it's, business people that I talk to don't talk about what a great business climate it is in New York State. They talk about, geez, I was out in Lake Tahoe, and it's what a wonderful place that is to locate a business, and the state taxes are zero in Nevada, and how different they recognize things are in different parts of the country when they visit.
This is, I'm reading from the Business Council's statement on the governor's tax relief proposal. This is big news for the state's economy, especially upstate, as this package will provide broad-based business tax relief and support key business sectors across New York. Heather Bruschetti of the Business Council was very complimentary, as were many of the other business groups like Unshackle Upstate and the small business independent manufacturing company. While your criticisms are well said and I understand what you're trying to say. There is a lot of people who don't agree with you, who are business people.
I understand. I hope they don't take the pressure off him to continue, because this package that he's proposing, if he were to be 100% successful, is nice, but it is only a start. It is only a start to making New York more competitive.
We have some action, I think, on stage at the Empire State Plaza. This is Lieutenant Governor John Duffy. Not John Duffy, Robert Duffy, excuse me. He is introducing the panel. Why don't we just check in with them for a minute.
Leader of the New York State Assembly, the Honorable Brian Cole. Next, please welcome the Democratic Conference Leader of the New York State Senate, the Honorable Andrea Stewart-Cousins. You win the applause, leader.
It's interesting that to note that Andrea Stewart-Cousins is the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, the mainstream Democrats, and there is some serious animosity between the mainstream Democrats and the four breakaway Democrats known as the IDC. Speaker Silver has been under enormous pressure because of all of the sexual harassment issues in his chamber. He has come out swinging, though, in this session with some comments on implementing the minimum wage more quickly than the governor had intended, and also questioning and saying that the Common Core needs to be reevaluated. Dean Skelos and Jeff Klein, who you just saw, are united as the coalition leading the state Senate. And then here is the governor. I just want to note that in years past, there used to be a Republican rebuttal after the governor, the Democratic governor. You know, this was during, or a Democratic rebuttal if the governor was Republican. That's a thing of the past. Okay, I think what they're doing is a few more formalities. I'm not sure. Sometimes there are, they have Pledge of Allegiance and a few other honorifics going on. It's a packed crowd, as you can see. Have you ever been, Marie?
I have not been, but I've watched quite a few.
Some of the people who I spoke with on the radio, like Larry Levy, this is, you know, their 25th State of the State.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is WCNY's live coverage of Governor Cuomo's State of the State address.
Thank you. Please take your seats.
There's a question about whether Robert Duffy will be on the ticket this time around.
I'd like to welcome Rabbi Shai Schechter from Knesset, Israel, and Far Rockaway to deliver a blessing.
Yeah,
Rabbi?
and there is, why don't you, we're on, go ahead. Talk.
Well, Joni Mahoney from Onondaga County, the county executive, is rumored to be the next lieutenant governor.
What do you think? Would she make a good lieutenant governor?
I think she probably would.
Absolutely.
Do you think it will bring, could she bring home the bacon to central New York? Do you think that, I mean, the role of lieutenant governor is such a difficult one. You really have to walk that fine line. And here with the governor, Governor Cuomo, he's such an alpha. It might be difficult to be the secundo when you have been, you know, the primo for so long, if you know what I mean. I don't think that Joni Mahoney will have a problem with that, but, you know, it's still going to be an effort, I would think.
Well, she might be able to define that role a little better than
Others have?
has been defined. A lieutenant governor, kind of like the vice president, you know, just kind of sitting in the background waiting for something to
For
happen.
something, right, exactly. Something.
You know, I think a great role for a lieutenant governor or a vice president is to tackle individual projects. So we go back again to mandate relief, talk about things like the Moreland Commission, the scaffold law that you talked to about. Those would be terrific things for a lieutenant governor to chair and tackle.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about Stan Lundeen, the long-suffering lieutenant governor under Mario Cuomo, who actually came into his own after Mario Cuomo was defeated. And he was on Governor Cuomo's consolidation commission for a while, I believe. We are waiting for the governor to start. Obviously, there are lots of different protocols, and people need to speak and say their thing. I'm betting that just like this last year and the year before, that we will be hearing from Speaker Silver, and we'll hear from Dean Skelos and Jeff Klein, all of the legislative leaders prior to the governor. What's different about this year than last year is that last year they didn't they weren't under investigation by the Moreland Commission. So while today is sort of the easy part for the governor, he just gets to lay out his agenda and say, this is what I want to do. What comes after is going to be hard, especially since some of the lawmakers don't like him anymore, and they don't think that he's been playing nicely with them. This could be a big problem for him to get his agenda across. We are still hearing the invocation. So, you know, you mentioned about what the governor should be addressing in your opinion, Bill. You mentioned some things, but you didn't say anything about the SAFE Act. Well, Marie said something about the SAFE Act, and I was surprised.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the SAFE Act, I think, could be his political undoing for him looking nationally.
It's already hurt him.
Clearly, and it should. I mean, the SAFE Act was poorly conceived. It was conceived under the dark of night and passed without really anyone really thinking about the deep ramifications of it. I don't remember what the total number is, but I think, was it 37 of 49 sheriff's departments have said they will not enforce it. I think that's an enormous statement, to say nothing of the rank and file citizenry that said, you've done nothing to make us safer, you've done nothing to prevent a new town, you've just made it more difficult for us to exercise our Second Amendment rights.
Let me throw this out. While all of that may be true, there was in this law, he made a connection between mental health and gun ownership. Is that a step in the right direction?
Possibly, but you know,
in almost every one of these high-profile gun deaths, shootouts, mental health has been an issue.
But who's qualified in the gun purchasing process to say whether you are mentally stable? You know, I think that again, there's so many connections to different organizations, and you know, would you take a student who has some attention deficit issues when they're in school, who now is documented that they've taken medication for attention deficit, 20 years later when they're a productive citizen now saying, well, you took medicine when you were in 8th grade, does that disqualify them from gun ownership? I think, you know, you're really treading on some very, very thin ice there.
The invocation is over. Why don't we check back in? Why don't we tune in? This is the recognition of leaders in the audience.
Assembly present.
Senate Governor Duffy, I'm pleased to report the Assembly is organized, ready to proceed with business.
Joe Morelli of Rochester.
No relation.
Different spelling.
I'd like to now recognize the State Senate Deputy Majority Leader, the Honorable Thomas Libous. Deputy Majority Leader, is the Senate present?
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. The Senate is present. In great anticipation, we await the Governor's address.
He's been very
Thank you,
ill.
Deputy Majority Leader.
He's suffering from cancer and receiving treatments.
Today. Please join me in acknowledging, first of all, the former statewide officials who are here with us today. First of all, please welcome former Governor of the State of New York, Governor David A. Paterson.
It's always nice to see former governors in the audience.
Next, please welcome the former Controller of the State of New York, the Honorable H. Carl McCall.
McCall also on the both of the governor's tax commissions.
Today we're also honored to be joined by the U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary Sean Donovan.
The position Andrew Cuomo used to hold in the Clinton administration.
I'd also like to welcome all the local officials from across the state that took time to join us here today. We have some new members to our ranks. I would like to extend a warm welcome to 4 of our newly elected mayors across the state, starting out west. From my hometown, Mayor Lovely Warren of the City of Rochester.
Lots of new women leading cities in upstate New York.
It's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Our host today, the Mayor of the City of Albany, Mayor Catherine Sheehan. And last but not least, the Mayor of the City of New York, Mayor Bill de Blasio.
The tallest mayor.
The tallest man?
Tallest
We
mayor.
also are very proud to have 4 of our newly elected county executives today. County Executive Edwin Day of Rockland County. Next, please welcome County Executive Vince Horgan from Chautauqua County. Next, County Executive Steve Newhouse from Orange County. And County Executive Matt Ossenfort from Montgomery County. It gives me great pleasure to recognize members of the governor's family who have joined us today. First, Mariah Kennedy Cuomo.
Is she the one that goes to
Also,
Harvard?
please welcome Sandra Lee, who joined us today. Finally, I'm very pleased to welcome the citizens of our state who came to join us today from all four corners of New York State to listen to Governor Cuomo's fourth State of the State address. I want to thank you all for attending, for taking the time to come here. And those of you that face very tough weather conditions, we especially thank you. And today up on the stage, we have flags from all of the state's 62 counties representing all of you. New York State has suffered 9 major natural disasters in the last 3 years. She has torn up roads in the North Country, washed away houses in the Catskills, flooded factories in the Southern Tier, and left millions of people in the dark in New York City and Long Island. Throughout it all, first responders from every corner of the state and from every level of government responded to call of duty. These are men and women who run towards danger when every fiber in our bodies tells us to run the other way. Today, we are joined by 125 first responders who have courageously served our country and our state during all of these tragedies. On behalf of Governor Cuomo, I first want to thank each and every one of them for their great service to our state and country, and thank you for your bravery and your courage and all you've done for all of us. And I would ask them to please stand. I would also ask everybody in attendance, if you join me in recognizing these incredibly brave individuals who have served us so well, led by General Murphy in the front row and 125 first responders. Please join me in a round of applause. Thank you all for your service. You make New York State very, very proud. Thank you. I'm now pleased to introduce Abby Albright, a 5th grade math teacher from the Cortland and Large City School District and one of our master teachers. Abby?
Hello. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Duffy. It is an honor to have this opportunity to address my fellow New Yorkers. Ever since I was young, I wanted to be a teacher. Today, I teach 8th grade math at Cortland and Large City School District. Our job is to give young New Yorkers the best shot at a bright future. I look at my students and I see future CEOs, doctors, engineers, and even governors. The beauty of teaching is that you learn as much as you teach. New York State understands that concept and values that passion. Governor Cuomo announced the Master Teachers Program in last year's State of the State. Earlier this year, I was chosen to be a master teacher. Thanks to this program, the state gives me financial incentives for taking the time to learn with my fellow educators how we can all perform better in the classroom. This makes me a better teacher for all my students. Each one of the master teachers brings a unique perspective, but all of us share one simple passion: giving our students a great education. The Master Teacher Program is just one of the many initiatives the state has launched over the last 3 years to invest in and dramatically improve public education. From teacher evaluations to pre-K and community schools to billions of dollars in new funding, the state is investing more in our classrooms and students than ever before. I am a mother to 3 boys, 3 New York students who deserve nothing less than state-of-the-art and first-rate teachers. I can already see the change in their classroom and mine, and there is no doubt that all New York students will reap the benefits of teachers who are more engaged and better equipped. That is how we prepare the next generation of global citizens right here in New York. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you, Abby. I'm now proud to introduce Pat Radke, who's the president of the UAW Local 897 from the city of Buffalo. Pat.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Duffy. It is an honor for the UAW, my membership, and myself to be here today. I have lived in New York and worked in New York for 43 years. I'm the proud president of UAW Local 897 in Hamburg. My family resides in Western New York. I raise my children along with my wife in Western New York. I love you, dear. To say that our area has fallen on hard times is an understatement. For years, I watched as my friends lost their jobs and struggled to pay their bills. I wonder if or when I would be next. It is a difficult feeling to explain, the stress and the fear. Factories were closing down, unemployment rates skyrocketing, and people continued to leave in search of opportunity. I grew up in Lackawanna, in the shadow of Bethlehem Steel, which employed tens of thousands of people. Now all those jobs are gone. In fact, I work in the only remaining standalone Ford stamping plant, and this is in an area which was rich with manufacturing jobs just 20 years ago. All the others have closed up and packed up and moved down the road. And through that time, our state government was nowhere to be found. I think it's clear, standing here today, that the tide has turned. And there is no better example of this progress than the Ford stamping plant just outside Buffalo where I work. About 6 weeks ago, the governor came into our plant to announce that Ford was going to invest $150 million in my facility, solidifying the factory's long-term presence in the region and creating and retaining 990 full-time, good-paying, permanent jobs in our community. Governor Cuomo was there, supporting the men and women in organized labor, standing up for our region once again. On the day that the governor came to our plant, 990 families were giving something you can't put a price tag on, and that is peace of mind. The Ford investment is just the latest surge of companies relocating to Western New York. They all see the activity in the region, and they want to be part of it. In what used to be a desolate, abandoned neighborhoods, you now see new businesses opening their doors, shovels in the ground, and more job opportunities than ever before. And people are moving back to Western New York because they know they can start a business, raise a family, and prosper. Even the site of the old Bethlehem Steel plant that I grew up next to is coming back to life. And I look around and read the news. I see what's happening not only in Buffalo, it's spreading across the state. Ford decided to stay because they knew they would never find a better, more dedicated workforce, no matter where they went. They decided to stay because, like so many other companies investing in New York, they got the support and the partnership they need from our state government. This is a new state government that is constantly working to help us reach our potential because we are the backbone of New York's economy and its communities. And finally, we have a state government that recognizes all these needs. So it is my honor and privilege to introduce the man who has transformed our state government, the governor of the great state of New York, the greatest state in the Union, Mr. Andrew Cuomo.
I would expect him to begin by pointing out again what it is that he has accomplished over the last 3 years.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, and Happy New Year to all of you. First, let's start by giving Pat a big round of applause for coming up and sharing his story. And Abby also, thank you very much, and thank you for what you do teaching our students. Let's give Abby a round of applause. To the great master of ceremonies for today, an outstanding lieutenant governor, a great public servant. He's been all over the state for 3 years. Nobody works harder or better than Lieutenant Governor Bob Duffy. Let's give him a round of applause. Our great controller, former member of the great New York State Legislature, Tom DiNapoli, pleasure to be with you. Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, who's doing a fantastic job for the state of New York. Pleasure to be with you, General. They were introduced already, but I can't overemphasize the cooperation, the partnership of the legislative leaders. We've had a great 3 years. It wouldn't have happened if these individuals didn't do what they did individually and work together the way they did. And as a personal point of privilege, I want to thank them for the kindness that they've shown me. Senate Leader Dean Skelos, Speaker Sheldon Silver, Independent Leader Jeff Klein. We're also pleased to be joined by Assembly Minority Leader Brian Kolb and Senate Minority Leader Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Pleasure to be with you. To the members of the court, Chief Judge, thank you. Members of the court, thank you very much for being with us, and thank you for your good service. To Governor David Patterson, number 55, let's give him another round of applause. Thank him for his good service. And again, Happy New Year to all of you. I think it's a year that is going to be a banner year for the state of New York, and that's what I'd like to speak to you about today, where we go in 2014. But there's an old saying that you don't really know where you're going until you know where you've been. And we should start this year with a look back when we first joined in this hall 3 years ago. The state of New York was in trouble. The New York State government was literally a joke at that time on late-night TV. It was about scandals, it was about indictments, it was about dysfunction. But even worse, this was not about a momentary lapse. These were fundamental structural problems that had been going on and growing for a long time and were now coming home to roost. It started with the simple fact that the state spent too much money. The state spent more money than the people in the state earned. And it did it not just for 1 or 2 years, but it literally did it for over 60 years. And if you spend a lot, then you're going to have to tax a lot. And we taxed a lot. And as a result, our taxes had become the highest in the nation. And we were paying a price for the high taxes. People and businesses were leaving the state. On top of that, for decades, Albany had become a poster child for gridlock. Long before Washington, D.C. put gridlock on the front pages, the story in Albany was gridlock. And it always happened at the time of the budget. Why? Because that's where the money is. And it was late. Over a 30-year period, 23 years, we had a late budget. Average late budget, 50 days. New York State had lost its way. We were spending more money, and we were actually getting less results for the people who we were supposed to be serving in the first place, because the government had become more concerned with special interests and with their contributions than the people and their problems. And these governmental failures were not in an abstract, it wasn't just in a government course. They had real negative effects, and the people of the state were suffering. 852,000 people unemployed, the largest number since the Great Depression. Property taxes the highest in the country. Upstate New York was in free fall. we were on the precipice of an abyss. The state's future was hanging in the balance, literally. And the cynics and the naysayers said that we were too far gone, and there was no way we were going to turn the ship of state around. But we knew that fortune favors the bold and that New Yorkers, if anyone, know how to beat the odds. And we set our sights high. We said we were going to restore economic opportunity to the state of New York. We said we were going to replace dysfunction with results, that we were going to put people before politics, and we were going to reestablish New York as the progressive leader of the nation once again. We stopped talking and we started doing. And in 3 years, my friends, you have reversed decades of decline and made dramatic and undeniable progress. For the first time in modern political history, the state has real fiscal discipline. We've held spending to 2%. For the first time in 40 years, spending is below the rate of inflation and below the rate of growth of personal income. And because we spent less, we could tax less, and we did. Every New Yorker pays less income taxes today than the day they did 3 years ago when we started this journey. We now have the lowest middle-class tax rate in over 60 years. And we don't just have lower tax rates. We have a fairer tax code. We went from a flat tax in the state of New York, where everyone paid the same income rate, regardless of how much income they earned, to a graduated rate, which is much more fair for the people of the state. After 20 years of trying, we passed the state's first property tax cap. And for the first time in 30 years, we broke the gridlock that had plagued Albany, and we passed 3 on-time budgets in a row. After years of false starts, we instituted a real teacher evaluation process that focuses on performance rather than merely growing the bureaucracy. After 30 years of talking, we passed casino gaming, which will bring a new economic future to parts of this state that have been suffering for too long. After decades of conflicts, we renewed our spirit of partnership with the Indian nations across this state. And let's take a moment to recognize the nation representative Ray Halbritter from the Oneida Nation of New York, Ron LaFrance of the St. Regis Mohawk, Beverly Cook of St. Regis Mohawk, and Michael Kimmelberg of the Seneca Nation. Thank you, and thank you for being with us today. Thank you. We said we would make New York safer, and we did. We passed common sense gun reform with the New York SAFE Act. We established an all crimes DNA database. We enacted tough new texting while driving laws. We said we would make New York healthier, and we did. We provided health insurance to more than 265,000 New Yorkers through our health exchange, and it worked well. We said we would make New York cleaner, and we did, opening a $1 billion green bank, adding more money to the Environmental Protection Fund. We said we'd make New York smarter, and we did. We expanded full-day pre-K, incentivized performance through master teachers, and launched SUNY and CUNY 2020. We said we would make New York fairer, and we did. We raised the minimum wage, we closed juvenile justice facilities, we opened the Justice Center, and we passed marriage equality. The proof is in the pudding, and the arrows are pointing up. We've added 380,000 new private sector jobs since 2010. New York is now ranked #2 in the nation in number of jobs created since the recession. And today, as we sit here, we have more private sector jobs in the state of New York than ever before in the history of the state of New York. Exports are up 15%. Our ratings are up from all three agencies at a time when the rating agencies are downgrading governments all across this country. All three rating agencies have a positive outlook for the state of New York. And because jobs and exports and our ratings are up, unemployment is down in every region of the state of New York. We have given New Yorkers a government that costs less, taxes less, and actually does more for the people who are in need. The progress is not just in the numbers. You can feel it in every region in our state. In the lower Hudson, they'll talk about the new New York Bridge that is rising after 20 years of talking. In Utica, they'll talk to you about the new future of nanotechnology. Even the two regions of the state that needed the most help 3 years ago, Western New York and the North Country, they are different places in just 3 years. Western New York is in the midst of an exciting transition. The Republic Steel plant that closed in 1984, which was the symbol of the low point of Buffalo, today is the same site where Riverbend is rising, a new R&D clean energy plant that's going to provide hundreds of jobs in Buffalo. There are even sightings in the Buffalo sky of a species long thought to be extinct in Buffalo. Cranes are flying once again in the Buffalo sky. Buffalo News editorial from this past New Year's Eve couldn't have said it any better. In Buffalo, for decades, the norm has been a glum acceptance that we live in a second-rate city with a fourth-rate economy, and that there was nothing to do about it but moan. Over the course of a year or so, the pall has lifted. Western New Yorkers started to regain confidence in their city and the direction in which it was headed. It qualifies as the story of the year, maybe the story of the decade. Congratulations to Mayor Byron Brown. Congratulations to County Executive Colin Kars, to Howard Zemsky, to Satish Tripathi, who have done great work. In the North Country, it's the same thing. The North Country was long ignored by Albany. But there is a new economic life. The Trudeau Institute is an emerging world-class biotech hub. There's going to be a new hotel in Saranac Lake. Bombardier's state-of-the-art rail car facility in Plattsburgh is going great guns. The North Country has a new future. And let's give them a round of applause for their turnaround. Three years ago, the Capitol was literally and figuratively crumbling. Today, it is shining brighter than it has in decades. You cut that ribbon on that new Capitol, and you should be proud. We did what we said we would do. And as elected officials, there's no statement that makes you prouder to say when you can look at the people of this state and say, we did what we said we would do. We changed the direction of this state for the better, and we have. Congratulations to all of you, and let's take a moment and recognize once again Senate Majority Coalition Leader Dean Skelos, Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, and Senate Leader Jeff Klein. Please stand, gentlemen, so we can give you a round of applause. Now, we have much more to do, but we are energized by a new strength, a new pride, and a new confidence. And let us build on that record of success. For New York State, job one is jobs. Our statewide job growth strategy starts with a top-down reducing tax theory. Our financial restructuring of the state has actually paid off. When we were here 3 years ago, we were looking at a $10 billion deficit. It was historic, and it made us all quake in our boots. I know it did me. We have gone from a $10 billion deficit to a $2 billion surplus in just 3 short years. This year, within the 2% spending cap, we can increase our investments in education, healthcare, economic development, and still provide more tax relief. We impaneled a bipartisan Pataki-McCall Tax Relief Commission, which did good work. They made the basic point that the state has no economic future as the tax capital of the nation. People move and businesses flee. So let's continue to make our state more competitive. Let's cut more burdensome business taxes. New York State's corporate tax rate is currently 7.1%. Let's cut it to 6.5%, which would be the lowest corporate rate since 1968, and really send a strong signal to business saying this is a different day and we're doing it a different way. Let's pass a manufacturer's tax credit for 20% of the firm's property tax liability. New York is one of only 15 states with an estate tax, and our exemption levels are among the lowest and our rates are among the highest. Let's eliminate the move to die tax, where people literally leave our state, move to another state to do estate planning. We propose raising New York's estate tax threshold and lowering the rate to put it in line with other states. We also need a renter's tax credit to help New Yorkers afford the ever-increasing housing costs that they're experiencing. And a circuit breaker, which is a property tax credit to help low and middle-income New Yorkers based on their ability to pay. The Pataki-McCall Commission recommended a freeze on property taxes for 2 years to help homeowners and to incentivize local governments to reduce costs. A property tax freeze, but only if 2 important conditions. Year 1, the locality stays within the 2% cap, and in year 2, the locality takes concrete steps to reduce their costs through shared services and/or consolidation. Because while we're reducing taxes, my friends, we also have to tackle a major structural problem, which is the proliferation and expense of local governments. The main tax burden in New York State is not the income tax. It is the property tax. We raise about $40 billion per year from the income tax. We raise $50 billion from the property tax. And that is the tax that you'll hear New Yorkers complaining about from one end of this state to the other. As a matter of fact, no matter how you look at it, New Yorkers don't just pay a high property tax, they pay the highest property tax in the United States of America. Literally, the highest property tax in the country is in Westchester County, in absolute dollars. When you look at by percentage of home value, the highest costs are in upstate New York, literally in the country. So why are our property taxes so high? Because we have too many local governments, and we've had them for too long. 10,500 local governments. These are towns, villages, fire district, water district, library, sewer district, one district, just to count the other districts in case you missed a district. We have a proliferation of government that is exceedingly expensive and costly. Now, the state has been very aggressive in trying to alleviate the burden from local governments. We've assumed more local costs than the state government has ever done in modern political history. We assumed a $1.2 billion cost of the Medicaid growth. We are funding $700 million in aid to localities. The Tier 6 pension reforms makes a major difference for local governments. We also offered local governments that are functionally insolvent financial assistance if they work with our financial restructuring board. When I was Attorney General, first of all, I looked much younger when I was Attorney General. When I was Attorney General, we actually passed a law that made consolidations easier for local governments. Since we passed that law, how many local governments have actually consolidated? Tom Libas gets it, 2. It's time to stop making excuses. It is time to start making progress. If the locality wants the state property tax credit, it must perform. We've seen that linking state funding to performance works. Remember when we did the teacher evaluations the first year, and we asked every district to complete teacher evaluations, we basically had no compliance. Year 2, we linked the teacher evaluation system with a 4% increase in education, and we had near unanimous approval. We believe linking the assistance to performance is going to make a difference. And there is a ray of hope, because there are local leaders who are stepping up to the plate. And I'd like to take a moment to recognize the great Onondaga County Executive Joni Mahoney and the Mayor of Syracuse, Stephanie Miner, who are working together to see if they can achieve consolidation and shared services between Onondaga County and the city of Syracuse. We wish them well, and we hope other leaders follow their example, because that's exactly the right course. Thank you very much, County Executive, and thank you, Mayor. Second, we need to eliminate the regulatory barriers. We all agree, eliminate any regulatory barriers that we can that are barriers to business growth. We've talked about it for many, many years. The Senate has held hearings. The Assembly has held hearings. Let's join together, create a joint commission, do it together, and let's pledge to stop talking about it and actually get it done this session. Drop the regulatory barriers that are stopping businesses from growing in this state. Third, we have to rebuild our infrastructure, because we need a 21st century infrastructure to build on. Our airports are the gateways to New York for nearly 50 million people each year. Vice President Biden was here yesterday talking about how countries all around the globe are developing their airports with sophistication and hospitality suites. Even our nation is doing a good job overall in updating its airports and upgrading its airports. Unfortunately, the state of New York has fallen behind. LaGuardia Airport is ranked as the worst airport in America, believe it or not. That is a disgrace, my friends, and it is unacceptable, and it's going to change. We need to modernize JFK and LaGuardia. We've talked about it for too long. We will assume management responsibility from the Port Authority for construction at JFK and LaGuardia airports. We'll do what we did with the Tappan Zee Bridge. We're going to step in, stop talking about it, get the government to work, and we're going to redevelop those airports the way they should have been redeveloped many, many years ago, and make us proud of that gateway once again. We must expedite the building of our energy superhighway. We still have a problem getting low-cost, excess clean, renewable power downstate from upstate, which is costing ratepayers $600 million a year. It can take up to 2 years, believe it or not, to get a new transmission project approved. And some of the proposed projects are causing concerns by expanding into local communities. Let's incentivize smart projects that locate within state-owned or existing transmission right-of-ways so they're not interfering or spreading into local communities. And let's offer those smart projects an expedited approval process that will cut the time from 2 years to 10 months if they do it smart. It's a win-win for upstate, which needs the economic growth, and it's ratepayer savings for downstate New York. Second part of our economic development strategy has been a bottom-up approach through regional collaborations. Our regional economic development councils are working. They are the core of our jobs agenda. The proof is in the pudding, and it is all across the state. Let's do another round of the REDCs, a fourth round, because let's build on what is working in this state, and working with local communities on a regional basis is working, and we have to do more of it. Last year, we launched Startup New York. There's nothing like it in this country. It makes New York the least expensive place in the United States to locate a business. It took our reputation of high taxes and anti-business and flipped it 180 degrees with passing just one program. Businesses nationwide are already expressing interest in Startup New York. We want to take it to the next step, and let's start to globally market Startup New York, because I believe we can literally have companies coming from overseas to this state because of the Startup New York program, and if we market it, that will happen. We want to hold an international conference at the Javits Center to introduce executives from overseas to the Startup New York and all the assets and beauty that this state has to offer. I also want to recognize at this time Mr. John Mack, who's the former CEO and chairman of the board at Morgan Stanley. He is a great financial mind. He's a leader in the business community, and John Mack has been generous in volunteering to help the state on financial matters writ large, but also to help market the Startup New York program, and his credibility is a tremendous asset when we're marketing New York and we're marketing Startup New York. Let's give him another round of applause, Mr. John Mack. Thank you very much. 3 years ago, we said we would focus on upstate New York. Why? Because the upstate economy lags not just the New York City economy, not just the rest of New York State, but it lags nationwide. Literally, over a 10-year period, when the nation was growing 9%, upstate New York was growing at just about half the rate of the country. And this is a problem, frankly, my friends, that we ignored for too long. And upstate New York then entered a downward cycle where they lost economic power, which caused a depopulation of the area, which caused the loss of political power, which caused the loss of governmental help, which then caused more economic power to be lost. And upstate New York has been in that cycle. Not for 1 year, not for 2 years, for 10, 20, 30 years. The notable exception was, frankly, here in the Capital District and nanoscale, where the state made a significant contribution, and with some real talent from Dr. Elaine Calleros, literally generated an entire industry. But it shows what the state could do when the state invested. But the state, besides the Capital District, in many ways forgot the rest of upstate New York, and we said we were going to change that and reverse it, and we did, and it's already paying dividends, and we want to do it again, and we want to start it with taxes. Let's go to the upstate manufacturers, because we need manufacturing jobs in upstate New York, and let's cut the corporate tax rate in upstate New York to 0 all across upstate New York, period. Why? Because you can't beat 0, my friends. and it is a competition. We've taken our tourism efforts to a new level. So far, we invested $40 million in our marketing campaign, and our investment is paying off. Tourism spending is up year to year $4 billion, believe it or not. It's twice the national rate of growth. Tourism jobs increased by 25,000, which is also twice the national rate of growth. We want to redouble our tourism efforts. We need the activity upstate New York, and with upstate New York, seeing is believing. If they visit again. If they visit, they enjoy it. It's just a matter of exposure, because once they come, they're hooked. We propose one-stop shop licensing, a New York State adventure license to help promote tourism, where you can go to one portal, you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, and you can apply for all your licenses, and they'll be literally presented on your Department of Motor Vehicle license, rather than having to deal with a lot of agencies and carry a lot of paper. That happens to be our Commissioner of the Department of Motor Vehicles, Barbara Fiala, who's doing a good job. It's a pleasure to recognize her. I did not know that Barbara was a trapper and a muzzle loader, however, but even better. Let's give her another round of applause, because she's a trapper and a muzzle loader. On this quest, the state will open up 50 previously closed state-owned land, so there'll be more opportunities for hunting, fishing, boating for both in-state people and tourists who come from out of state. We're going to launch a whole new signage campaign on our roads, promoting the assets of New York, organized into 3 campaigns: the Path Through History campaign, the I Love New York attraction campaign, and the Taste of New York food and beverages. You'll see these signs on the roads literally over the next few days. And these campaigns link online to all those attractions in that particular area, all along the thruway and all along major routes. The goal is to get people who are on the roads, off the roads, into communities, and fostering and promoting the economy of the state of New York. Last year, I invited some of you to participate in the Adirondack Challenge at this speech at this time. Most of you accepted the challenge. We had the new guys who came proudly. We had the tough guys who came. We had Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, who actually made a guest appearance. We had the Thelma and Louise's raft, which was a highly competitive one. We had the Odd Couple raft. And we had the City Slicker raft. We had the Master Rafters, or at least people who thought they were Master Rafters. Oh, that's embarrassing, Larry. But 2 important people were missing. And we put out an all-points bulletin because we were very concerned when they weren't there. We expected them to be there. We were hoping that they would be there. We were sure they were there. And therefore, when they weren't there, we were very concerned and did what we were expected to do. We were later happy when we found out at least they were okay. In a new spirit of bipartisanship and cooperation, taking it to new heights, Speaker Sheldon Silver and Senate Leader Dean Skelos. Since we know that something pressing must have come up, because they would never just on a random fluke miss a pressing competition, we are giving them a second chance And a second challenge this year, it's the 2014 Bassmaster Classic. It's the Governor's Challenge. It's August 21st. It'll be held on Owasco Lake. I once again hope that Dean Skelos and Sheldon Silver and Jeff Klein are there for the competition. It will be all in good sport, but I hope they're there. You're all invited, and we'll have some fun, and we'll promote some tourism. I'll see you there. Our casino plan is already generating great interest. We said we believed it would, and it is. Our challenge now is to make casinos a reality, make it happen fast, and make it happen correctly. Our current plan is March 2014 for the RFP to go out. Bids come back in June, and we hope to make the selections in early fall. The casinos are going to be run by the Gaming Commission, and the chairman of the Gaming Commission, which is an appointment by me, is going to be Mr. Mark Guerin, who is the president of Hobart and William Smith Colleges. He is a great academic. He's former director of the Peace Corps. He's a model of civic engagement. He's done a great job at the university, and it's a pleasure to have him, and we thank him for taking the time to take on this important obligation. Mr. Mark Guerin, thank you very much. Our targeted investments in public-private sector partnerships are working. We want to keep the momentum going with a second round of the Yogurt Summit, the Regional Beer, Wine, and Spirits Summit, the Tourism Summit, the Path Through History Summit. We want to add this year a summit, agricultural summit, to help connect upstate producers to downstate consumers. I believe there's a very interesting market that could be developed, and we want to do our best. The Buffalo Billion is working. It really is working better than I think anyone could have anticipated. We want to take the next step and locate the Genomic Medicine Center in Western New York. The genomic medicine is the next frontier in modern medicine, and we believe we can lead the way. We want to create a genomic medicine network partnership among UB and the Medical Corridor, CNSE, IT, the New York City Genome Center. It's creating hundreds of jobs and an entirely new industry for Western New York. So let's get at it. In the North Country, the proposed Route 98 could reduce travel time and speed up commerce. Let's see if we can make it a reality. We've been talking about it for years. Let's get DOT to undertake a study and see if we can make this project happen. That's our focus on upstate New York. You can see it's comprehensive, from tax credits to tourism to casinos to targeted investments to Buffalo and Route 98. It's been an important priority. It's paying dividends, and we're going to keep it going. But whether it's upstate or downstate, the best long-term economic development strategy is to have the best education system in the world, period. And that's our focus. We are in the midst of an education reinvention, replacing a 1950s bureaucracy with a 2020 performance organization. We formed the New York Education Reform Commission, headed by Chairman Dick Parsons. They have done extraordinary work. They're called for full-day pre-K, extending school days, and for performance pay. The next step now in our journey is to reinvent our classrooms with new technology. We must transform our classrooms from the classrooms of yesterday to the classrooms of tomorrow. Experts said that technology would be the great equalizer. They said that the information superhighway would be a democratizer of education. And that's correct, and they are right, if you are on the information superhighway. But if you're not on the information superhighway, it could leave you behind at 100 miles per hour. and there are great disparities in education. At some schools, there are children who are on the internet. Some schools, they don't even have a basketball net. There are some schools where they have sophisticated new computer systems on the first grade. There are some schools where the most sophisticated piece of electronic equipment is the metal detector that you walk through on the way to the classroom. And that is just wrong in the state of New York. We can do better, we must do better, we will do better. Let's invest in the future. Let's reimagine our classrooms for the next generation. Let's have the smartest classrooms in the nation because our children deserve nothing less than the best. Let's go to the people of this state. Let's be bold. Let's go to them in November. Let's put on the ballot a bond referendum for the Smart Schools Initiative. Let's invest $2 billion in providing the technology of tomorrow, today, to bring our classrooms up to speed. What does new technology mean? It means every child learns at his or her own pace. Students get the skills they need to succeed in the 21st century economy, access to advanced courses. Parents and teachers can communicate, and teachers can access the assistance and training they need. It's not going to be about growing the bureaucracy. It's going to be about helping students. It's going to be used for equipment such as laptops, desktops, tablets, infrastructure upgrades, high-speed broadband. There'll be strict eligibility on the use of funds, and each district must submit a technology plan for approval by the state. And while we remake our classrooms for tomorrow, we must get young minds engaged as early as possible. In 2013, in the State of the State, we called for expanded full-day pre-K. The Assembly has long championed the same. It's time for New York State to have universal full-day pre-K statewide. Quality teachers are the backbone of our education system. And let's recognize and thank Master Teacher A.B. Albright, who did the introduction, for her introduction today and for being here. Thank you again, A.B. We're going to continue the transformation of our system and reward performance by creating a Teacher Excellence Fund. It's going to be the first statewide teacher performance bonus program that actually rewards performance for teachers and incentivizes teachers who perform well. Teachers who are rated highly effective on their evaluations, which is the highest statewide rank, would be eligible to receive $20,000 as a bonus in performance pay, which is on average 27% of their salaries. You want teachers who can perform and who do perform, then incentivize performance with a performance bonus and pay them like the professionals they are. When it comes to higher education, our SUNY 2020 and CUNY 2020 reinvestment and capital programs are working. We want to continue them for a second round. The future of the economy is in STEM jobs. We should be incentivizing our education system to fill those openings. We want to provide to the top 10% of high school graduates full scholarships to any SUNY or CUNY school if they pursue a math or science career and agree to work in the state of New York for 5 years. After Storm Sandy, Irene, and Lee, the New York State as we know it faces a different reality. We had more storms this year in the central part of the state, and for government officials, it's an entirely new challenge. County executives, governors, mayors were accustomed to dealing with the matters of cities and states, but this really is a challenge that no one can be fully prepared for. Luckily, we have extraordinary elected officials in the state of New York, and we have extraordinary county executives who I've had the pleasure to work with through these storms. And I'd like to, at this time, recognize Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone, Nassau County Executive Ed Mangano, Oneida County Executive Anthony Precenti, for really working above and beyond the call of duty and doing extraordinary work for the people of their county. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. After what we went through, we literally have to reimagine New York because all the rules, all the theories are out the window. And it's now, through the experiences, reimagining how New York should be built, because extreme weather in many ways changes everything. First, we want to start by installing the nation's most advanced weather detection system here in the state of New York, because early detection will literally save lives, and we haven't been getting the correct information early enough. And the state will embark on putting in the most sophisticated weather detection device ever installed by a state. We're going to establish the nation's first college on emergency preparedness and homeland security. Believe it or not, there is no such college. There are colleges that offer courses in the area. But we're going to establish the nation's first college dedicated solely to emergency preparedness and homeland security, because I believe this is a field that's only going to grow. Unfortunately, it's only going to get worse. And we want this college right here in the state of New York training our people and training others from around the country. We've recruited Ray Kelly to be a special advisor to the state in setting up this school. Ray Kelly has phenomenal experience in terrorism and homeland security, and we're honored to have him. We'll create a citizen responder corps to train our own citizens. We want to train 100,000 citizens in the state of New York by year's end, so people know how to provide services in their own home, for their own family, and then they can be helpful on their own block and on their own community. We have to totally harden our transit system. When we built the New York City transit system, we didn't envision floods that could fill the subway system. The tunnels are open, the subway entrances are all open. And in a situation like Sandy, that just created tremendous flooding. We now have to reimagine a subway system where you can close all those openings. And we're going through that with a $5 billion massive plan. That picture is of an experimental inflatable plug that is inflated to plug a subway tunnel to keep the water out. We will open a new spur for Metro-North Railroad to provide more resiliency and direct access to Penn Station, which will also at the same time build 4 new stations to bring transit options to the Bronx. We will repair and replace over 100 bridges in upstate New York with new state-of-the-art bridges that are designed to maintain their structural integrity given the floods that we're dealing with. The totality of our reconstruction program is over 1,000 projects costing over $16 billion. It is the largest reconstruction program the state has ever undertaken, believe it or not. And it is thanks to our federal partners. It's thanks to the congressional delegation that helped us get a $60 billion supplemental after Hurricane Sandy, so we have the funding to do it. And it is also thanks to an extraordinary gentleman, an extraordinary New Yorker, who is the HUD secretary, but he was a New Yorker first. And he has been a great partner to New York. He's the person who led the federal government interagency task force He's here with us. Let's give him a big round of applause and thank Sean Donovan for his partnership. But, my friends, even with all that, we still have more to do. We have to make New York healthier. Research suggests that medical marijuana can help manage the pain and treatment of cancer and other serious illnesses. 20 states have already started to use it. We'll establish a program allowing up to 20 hospitals to prescribe medical marijuana, and we will monitor the program to evaluate the effectiveness and the feasibility of a medical marijuana system. New York also means justice for all. Governor Patterson increased the MWBE contracts to 10%, the goal for MWBE contracts, and we applaud him for that. In 2011, we set an ambitious MWBE goal, doubling that to 20%. I'm pleased to tell you that we actually beat it this year and have exceeded the goal of 20%. This year, we will focus on certifying more companies, more MWBE companies, so we can even create more jobs. There are other New Yorkers who we can help in this way. Disabled veterans showed us their loyalty. We must show them our loyalty. Let's set a goal of 5% in awarding of state contracts to disabled veterans-owned small businesses. We will host a summit this spring to find ways to make this goal a reality. Our New York Youth Works program that we started last year has helped 13 inner-city youth find work. Unfortunately, the unemployment rate is still 40% for inner-city youth. There is still more to do. We want to extend the New York Works program, extend the length of the tax credits to businesses to create more jobs, and provide job training through a job linkage program. Let's get these young people working. Let's get them a future. Affordable housing is a crisis. Homelessness is growing. We're going to increase our commitment by investing an additional $100 million in building affordable housing. This country set in 1949 as a goal a decent home and a suitable living environment for every American family. That was 1949. It still hasn't become a reality. In 2014, every New Yorker deserves a safe, clean, decent place to live, and let's make it a priority for this state government by putting $100 million more into affordable housing. We have good news in the criminal justice front. The good news is crime is down and our prisons have fewer people in them. We are reducing the madness of an incarceration society and ending a system of unnecessary human and financial waste. And now we have eliminated 5,500 prison beds. The bad news, you should applaud for that. The bad news is there's a revolving door where 40% of the people who are released from prison wind up back in prison. We need to provide the reentry support and services like job training and access to key services to ease that transition into mainstream society. Reducing recidivism means less crime, it means safer communities, it means fewer taxpayer dollars spent on incarceration. Let's stop the revolving door once and for all. Let's create a reentry council that brings together all the state resources and coordinates them so we make those transitions effective and lasting. Our juvenile justice laws are outdated. Under New York state law, 16 and 17-year-olds can be tried and charged as adults. Only one other state in the nation does that. It's the state of North Carolina. It's not right. It's not fair. We must raise the age. Let's form a commission on youth, public safety, and justice, and let's get it done this year. Last year, we proposed a 10-point Women's Equality Act agenda. Why? Because discrimination against women is very much alive and well. Since last year, nothing has changed. Discrimination against women still exists. It's just been another year when government has failed to act on behalf of women. Stop playing politics with women's rights and pass the Women's Equality Act this year. $47,000 drivers with 3 or more drunk driving convictions are still on the road. Think about that as you drive home tonight. It's absurd. Let's change the law. Anyone convicted of drunk driving 2 times in 3 years should lose their license for 5 years. And 3 strikes and you're out and you are off the road, period. There's an old Italian expression, we grow too soon old and too late smart. For young drivers, a cell phone can be more dangerous than a bottle of alcohol. For teen drivers, texting while driving creates more fatal accidents than drinking while driving, believe it or not. 77% of young adults say that they can text and drive safely. They're wrong. Let's continue to crack down on texting while driving. If a teenager is caught texting while driving, they should lose their license for 1 year. Let them learn this lesson. They are our sons and our daughters, and let's save lives. I'd like to, at this time, recognize Ben Lieberman and his family. Ben and his family lost Evan, a 19-year-old who was killed in a car accident when the other person was texting and driving. They have taken that pain and turned it into a positive by being ferocious advocates to change these laws and inform teens. He's been advocating all across the state and the country. Let's give Ben Lieberman a round of applause. Last year, I appointed a Moreland Commission to investigate public corruption. There's a disagreement about the need for more ethics reform. I understand that. The argument by some members of the legislature is that we created J-COPE and that should solve the problem. But there's been a string of bad acts almost on a daily basis. Open up the newspaper, even today, and you see more and more stories of individual legislators who have done bad acts. And it reflects poorly on all of us because people don't distinguish. It's an assemblyman, it's a senator, it's a Democrat, it's a Republican. It's just a politician. And it's just a state politician who works in state government. That's all they hear and that's all they know. And it reflects on all of us. So, well, I didn't do it, it's not my problem. No, it is a problem for all of us, and it goes to the essence of what we are all trying to do. Ethics reform is an acknowledgement of the problem and an acknowledgement that we need to fix the system. Ethics reform says to the people of this state, yes, I saw the news articles too. And it bothers me, and I'm troubled by it. And we're going to pass ethics reform because we're going to change the system because we understand your concern that there seems to be a pattern of these repeated instances of bad acts. That's what ethics reform is. That's why I was arguing for ethics reform last year. And that's why I'm arguing for ethics reform this year. I propose a new anti-bribery and corruption laws, public financing of elections, independent enforcement at the Board of Elections, and disclosure of outside clients with business before the state. But I believe we must act. Why? Because when government has the public trust, government has the capacity to do good work. Some have suggested that suggesting the Moreland Commission or ethics reform suggests that I don't believe in the legislature. It actually is the exact opposite. I do believe in the legislature. I do believe in this. I do believe in us. I do believe in New York State government. I do believe in our capacity. And I don't want to see it limited. And government is limited by the lack of trust. And the more trust, the more capacity. This is working. We went through all the stats and all the statistics on the progress of the state. We have done what we said we were going to do. We've turned the state around. We're balancing budgets. We're working together. We put the politics aside. We come into the chamber. We're not Democrats. We're not Republicans. We're New Yorkers, and we're working for New York. And that is working. And we have accomplished great things. And I want to see us do even more together. And I believe the more trust we have from the public, the more we can do. I believe it's like fuel for a rocket. If we have the trust of the people and they're watching us perform and they're seeing this state move, then there's nothing we can't do. And I don't want to see any limit when we have so much more to do. Look at the agenda we outlined today. We have to rebuild this entire state after Sandy, Irene, and Lee with a whole new vision for resiliency and redundancy. We're going to invest in our schools like we've never done before. We're going to get the economy back. We're reforming the tax code. So much good work. But we need the public with us, and we need the public to trust us and believe in us. And that's what ethics reform is all about. And my last point is this. A few weeks ago, I found a situation that I actually found quite disturbing. And there was an article in the newspaper about a high school in Pine Bush, New York. And the article said that a group of parents, a group of Jewish parents, were bringing a lawsuit against the school because their children had been victims of anti-Semitism. Swastikas drawn in the school, anti-Semitic remarks, throwing money at kids and making ugly, crude statements. This is in a high school. But really troubling actions and situations. I read the article and I called the state education department, and no one had heard about it. I called the Division for Human Rights, and they hadn't heard about it. I called the state police, and they hadn't heard about it. This is despite the fact that when the news article was written, the lawsuit had been filed a year before, federal lawsuit filed a year before, and the complaints had gone on for 5 years, and no one knew about it. I want to propose a very simple law that gets to the heart of who we are. If a school official in the state of New York is aware of a pattern of racial or religious discrimination or harassment, that state official is under an affirmative duty to notify the state education department, and the police, or that state official is no longer a state official, because that's not who we are, and that's not how we perform. And as we leave here today, let us recommit and remember what makes New York special and what makes us special as New Yorkers. New York is not about the buildings, and it's not about the land. What makes New York so special is the people, and it's how we treat each other, and it's what we have here, and it's what we have here. It's how we feel, and it's what we believe. And it's the premise that made this state the great state it was in the first place. And it's why the Pine Bush situation is so troubling to me, because this state made a very loud and clear statement. This state said to the entire world, we are open for business, and we welcome everyone here to this great state of New York. That is the Statue of Liberty in the harbor. Come one, come all. We don't care the color of your skin. We don't care your religion. We don't care how much money you have in your pocket. You come to New York, and we will welcome you, and we will work with you, and we will invite you into the family of New York. And while other states say we're afraid of diversity, while other states are building fences, we say we're excited by the diversity. We welcome the diversity. The diversity is what made us in the first place. And we believe we can take that diversity and we can take those differences and we can make one from those differences. We believe we can forge community from the people we welcome here. And the concept of community is we're all in this together, that there's a cord that connects you to you to you to you, and that cord weaves a fabric. And when one of us is raised, we're all raised, and when one of us is lowered, we're all lowered, because we're part of one community and we're part of one fabric. And that's what made New York great, and that's what continues to make New York great, that at the end of the day, we are one. We are upstate, we are downstate, but we are one. We are Latino, we are African American, but we are one. We're New York City and we are Buffalo, but we are one. We are Democrat and Republican, but we are one. That is the promise of this great state. That is e pluribus unum, out of many, one. It's the founding premise, the enduring promise. It's the promise that we inherited from our parents, and the promise of New York that we're going to pass on to our children, and the promise, my friends, that we are going to make a reality in this great state working together. Thank you, and God bless you, and let's have a great 2014.
Well, that was a wide-ranging and emotional speech that presented both the small and the large. I have to say I was surprised by some of the policy recommendations that the governor made, including the new SUNY school, including recommending a new law to deal with hate speech. Do you think, what did you think, Marie?
Well, I thought the governor talked about a lot of his accomplishments and laid out a lot of spending, not a lot of details about where the money is coming from, although he did mention that
Although that's not the purpose of this speech.
That's true. He laid out a policy agenda. He talked a lot about education, but he didn't mention two important words, Common Core.
No, he didn't.
And I think that has his critics riled up a little bit.
What did you think, Bill Broad?
Well, I think he said a few things that I particularly like about that I think will be really good for Central New York. You know, the idea of promotion of tourism. Clearly, that's going to be a big benefit for Central New York. I think this genomics center in Buffalo that he announced, if it follows in the footsteps of what happened with the nanotechnology center in Albany, it will be a world-class center and it will spur economic development in that region. I thought what he said about the lack of trust in government probably resonates with everybody, no matter what political affiliation you might find yourself in. I don't think there's very many people that think that the state government is functioning well, and I think that there's an awful lot of people that would like to see pretty major reforms go on there, and have those politicians held to the same standards that all of us are held to.
Digital divide, $2 billion bond act to rectify the technology shortfalls in some of our schools. I thought that was, I mean, that's one of the most expensive projects after the infrastructure projects. What do you think?
Well, he's going to ask voters to approve borrowing to support that. So
Why that issue?
why the division? It's important to education, and clearly school districts are not able to raise their taxes. There's a tax cap, and so they can't afford to provide the technology that kids ought to have in schools, and also in urban districts. They barely have enough to, have the books on the desk. They're not overflowing with technology in schools in big cities.
One of the most interesting moments was the image of Speaker Silver and Dean Skelos sunning themselves on some bipartisan beach somewhere. These are two people that couldn't have less in common when it comes to their policy agendas. It's going to be hard for the governor to get past Moreland and get all of this stuff passed. The one thing all of them have in common, though, is that they're all up for re-election. Does that make you scared, Bill? Because during election years, really weird things can happen. If you think we see strange bedfellows during off-election years, election years can be even worse.
I wouldn't necessarily say it scares me, but, well, the thing that does scare me about major leaders in Albany being up for re-election is the fact that 96% of incumbents are re-elected. So it's very hard for
There's an incumbent protection plan in place here.
Yeah, and I'm not sure anything that he mentioned today or anything that even has been discussed is going to break that stranglehold. But it goes back to the voters' lack of trust in government, and yet they, most of the time, the voters seem to say it's your guy who's the problem. My guy needs to stay because he brings home the bacon for our area. So what does scare me is that we don't usually see much changeover in the thinking and in the way things are done. And until we have some pretty major reforms coming out of Albany, that's probably not going to change.
What we're not seeing right now, but what is being broadcast, I believe, is the rebuttal from State Senator Dean Skelos. I had said that typically we're not seeing those anymore, but I was wrong, obviously. And we have the text of his rebuttal, and he is proposing the creation of a New York State taxpayer relief fund this year, which would basically make the property tax cap and the middle class tax cuts that they passed last year permanent. It seems like some of these politicians are enjoying one-upping each other in the public sphere. I mean, it's great to hear that the governor is for statewide universal pre-K, but again, how do you pay for something like that?
Sure, and don't forget that legislators, you have a check in your mailbox in October from the legislators reminding that they passed, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
A rebate, just to remind you that the legislature.
No, that was during the budget last year.
Was it during the budget last year?
Yeah,
Okay.
During the budget, right. If you have a child, you will get a check in the mail, and some people who, I'm not saying one way or the other, but some have called that a legal bribe to get your vote. Regulatory reform is also on the agenda of the Senate Republicans, and interestingly enough, and I want to quote this, let's enact a women's equality bill. Again, this is State Senator Dean Skelos. He's the head of the Republicans in the legislature. Let's enact a women's equality bill that protects all women from discrimination in the workplace and ensures equal pay for equal work. Does not say anything about the abortion provision in that bill. How important is that?
Well, the abortion is, last year they broke up the Women's Equality Act into separate bills so they wouldn't have to pass the abortion one. That's a non-starter in the Republican-led Senate, and it's great if they want to do equal pay and other workplace protections for women, but Cuomo wants the abortion bill, and he's not going to get it, I don't think.
How important is that to you?
The abortion bill? I personally don't believe abortion is a legislatable thing. That's a moral issue, and I don't believe that legislation should control it. That's between an individual and their own conscience. So I think legislation should stay out of moral issues.
So how important is it to you in terms of the lawmakers actually spending time on something like this?
Zero.
That's what I
Zero.
would have
And
guessed.
this whole medical marijuana thing, I can't believe he wasted time talking about that.
What about texting while driving? Does that rank up there with the other topics in terms of you think that it's a waste of time?
The texting while driving, I think it's pretty clear that that's a whole industry and an issue and a problem that it's relatively new. I watch my kids and the amount that they text, and I can imagine it's extremely distracting. For a kid to be trying to text and drive, it's distracting for anyone, whether you're a child or an adult.
So let's talk about a few other proposals. 10% of high school grads will get a free ride or a cut rate ride at SUNY and CUNY schools if they promise to stay in the state for 5 years. Ingenious. There's a problem with graduates leaving the state. That's a smart proposal. What do you think?
I think it's, that's one of the ideas where you see a return on investment. Now, devil in the details, how do you keep somebody? So let's say they go to work for this nanotechnology center for an IBM affiliate in Albany and they get transferred. Are you going to say, no, you can't take the transfer and the promotion? Yeah, I think there's probably some challenges there, but anything that invests in the infrastructure, true invest with the infrastructure that has a return on investment, I would usually be all for that.
Performance bonuses for excellent teachers.
Well, he had a master teacher introduce him, and that's an idea I think that teachers will like. How many teachers will be able to achieve that, I don't know, and it's if it's based on the test scores and other controversial ideas in education in New York, then there's going to be some skepticism.
In speaking with some teachers, the master teacher idea, and it sounds like this as well, it's a move to perhaps get away from the tenure idea. Mm-hmm. Is that, how do you feel about that? Is that something that you think would fly in the Syracuse area?
Well, not much about the education reform has flown in the Syracuse area. I don't know. I think parents want good teachers in their schools, and however you can achieve that is, I think, going to fly.
We have 2 minutes.
Can I just comment one thing on that too? The teachers that fear tenure, in my experience, are teachers who probably shouldn't be teaching. Most teachers who are really good in New York...
Teachers don't fear tenure, they want tenure.
They want tenure, they fear losing tenure. And New York has always had a reputation for turning out outstanding teachers. When you're educated as a teacher in New York State, you can generally go anywhere in the nation because of the high regard that people have for New York State teachers. Just like any industry, there's always going to be a few that aren't as good as what you would call the mainstream, and then there's always going to be some excellence, and you should celebrate the excellence. And it would be okay to peel out people who shouldn't be in the business, just the way any profession is.
So I want to ask each of you to grade the state of the state. I know that's, but please, if you could just bear with me. What do you think, Marie?
I would give it B+.
B+ is a pretty good grade.
Well, the governor, always has new ideas. He uses this speech to throw a lot of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. So we'll see what the legislature grabs onto.
Bill Broad.
I would agree. I think a B+. The purpose of the State of the State is to encourage and excite people about the future, and he clearly can do that. There's lots of work to do, and there's lots of disagreements that have to be sorted out, as you would expect. But it's his job to lead as the chief executive of New York State, and he's doing the best he can to do that. And I would give him reasonably high marks for that. He's got a lot of work to do.
Best part of the speech, pointing out Joni Mahoney and Mayor Minor. That was a nice shout out to Syracuse, although not many other policy nods to Syracuse, whereas Buffalo and Rochester did get some. We are out of time. I want to thank my guests today. You guys were just terrific. Marie Morelli is the editorial opinion leader for Syracuse.com and the Syracuse Post-Standard. It's always great to hang with you on the TV.
Thanks, Steve.
And Bill Braun, you were just terrific, publisher and CEO of the Syracuse New Times. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for watching.